Good evening, and welcome to the twice-monthly meeting of Westminster's Mayor and Common Council. During the public health emergency, we will be conducting our meetings virtually, and they will be available and streamed live on the city's Facebook page, as well as the Community Media Center channel and website. We'll begin as we do every meeting with the pledge to the flag, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Copies of tonight's agenda and the entire information packet that the council will be using are available online and on the city's website. First, we'll consider the approval of the minutes. We have minutes from the special meeting of the Mayor and Common Council of October 30th and the closed session of the same night, the Mayor and Common Council meeting of November 9th and the closed session of the same night, and the special Mayor and Common Council meeting of November 10th. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve all 5 sets of minutes.
Thank you. I have a motion from Ms. Gilbert and a second from Mr. Dayhoff. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it, and the minutes are adopted. Thank you. We're going to start off this evening with a presentation on furnishings for the city's new administrative offices at 45 West Main Street. We have with us tonight Ms. Connie Kumar of Gant Burnett Architects to walk us through the recommended package. Just a note to everybody that as a courtesy to Ms. Kumar, we'll go ahead and have the discussion on the package and act on the recommendations immediately after her presentation. And so with that, Ms. Matthews, I guess we'll start with you.
Thank you, President Pecoraro. I'll just make a few introductory comments and then turn it over to Ms. Kumar. Just by way of background, in March of 2020, the city executed modification number 7 to the city's contract with Gant Burnett Architects, the project architect for the 45 West Main renovation project. Agreement modification number 7 provides for interior design services, specifically the inventory of the city's existing furniture and recommendations on components that can be repurposed and what needs to be purchased new. Recommendations for new furniture selections, including colors, fabrics, and functional features. Identification of governmental discounts that would be available to the city. Preparation of an itemized listing of new furniture to utilize in the procurement process. And verification that any delivered furniture being purchased by the city met the required specifications. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Kumar.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and put together just kind of a brief presentation to go through kind of the process we've already been through to get to the furniture selections, some floor plans to just kind of show you an idea of quantities that we're looking at, and then finishes as well. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this.
It's on my screen.
Good, okay. All right, so one of the first steps in the process was kind of doing an assessment of the existing furnishings. I did a walkthrough with Barb and kind of just talked to the staff about what they have in place now, what works and what doesn't work. And the space right now is kind of a variety of styles, different pieces of furniture that have kind of been acquired over the years. People kind of pull and grab what works for them to make their office space work. As a result, a lot of the pieces are pretty well worn. Some are starting to show some signs of disrepair, like file cabinets that the drawers don't close properly or lock. So some of those pieces I think would need replacement regardless. And then another piece that we looked at was, are the spaces being reconfigured for the new building? Is the existing furniture going to work well in there? And there are some offices that are kind of an open office setup right now in cubicles that are being converted into private offices. And so obviously spaces like those are ones where we needed to look at, now the needs are different. So when we started looking at what should we take into account for the new furniture, there are certain government contracts that are available that offer discounts. Those discounts are basically set in place by the different manufacturers, and then local vendors, like we're working with one that's located in Owings Mills, which is pretty nearby. And they work with several manufacturers who set discounts in place that government agencies can take advantage of. So the one that we're using here is the MAPT discount pricing, which is the Mid-Atlantic Purchasing Team discount. And these manufacturers set the prices, and then the vendors can pass that discount on to you. The advantage of working with the vendors is that they work with multiple manufacturers, so you're not just completely limited in your choices. Another thing that we looked at was the longevity. If you're moving into a new space and making this investment into the furniture package, you want something that's going to last a long time. So we looked at manufacturers that offer extended warranties. Most of the furniture we looked at, it's limited lifetime warranties. So there's certain pieces of equipment like the electronics might have a little bit of a shorter warranty, but it's manufacturers who have been around for a long time and really stand behind their products. Something else to consider was the style aspect. We were looking for a cohesive design, something that would work well with kind of the modern look of the new administrative offices. A lot of times, a piece of furniture that might not look too bad in an existing space, when you move it into some place where everything else is brand new, things kind of stand out. So we wanted something that would blend well with the investment of the new office spaces. And then there's an aspect of convenience that goes hand in hand with moving into some place that's already furnished versus disassembling all of your existing furniture and just having to transport it. There's a little bit of downtime that would be associated with that. And in this case, if you're investing in new furniture, when you move in, everything's going to be installed and ready for you to use right away. So these next few slides are just the floor plans with some furniture placed in them, so you can kind of get an idea of how the space fills up with the furniture. The basement or the ground level is where the training rooms are located. So what we're showing in there is a mix of furniture that can easily be reconfigured within the spaces. So things like tables and chairs on casters that are easy to store and move around so that the spaces can be easily rearranged for different types of meetings or seminars. Within the community meeting hall right now, we're just showing some stacking chairs until a definitive use for that room is kind of agreed upon. The stacking chairs would work for any kind of assembly type space. So that's the bulk of the furniture on that floor. And then when we move into the first and second floor levels is where you get more of the typical office type furniture. So for this package, we looked at the typical office setup being a desk with return, a task chair, guest seating based on the specific office needs. Most have at least one, but some have 2 task chairs. In some cases, for the higher levels, it's like an individual table with 4 chairs. And then a lateral file for storage and a bookcase as well. So there's some manipulations of that configuration, but in general, that's the typical office setup. And these second and third floor levels also have in them some conference room spaces, some lounge seating, and then kind of the record and active file storage spaces as well. And so in this image, you can see to the right is kind of depictions of the styles of furniture that we're looking at with the different desk configurations listed underneath. This floor is kind of the same setup. It's again, mainly individual office spaces with some record storage as well. So it's a lot of the same types of pieces depicted. I think the only real difference is kind of in the IT and planning departments who've got some of the drafting tables as well based on specific needs. So this slide kind of shows you the visual of what that typical office setup would look like with the finishes that we've been looking at. So this depicts the actual carpet, wall paints, and the desk laminates, the upholstery on the guest chairs. The view is kind of done as if you're seeing through the walls, so that's why you're kind of seeing the back of the file cabinet, but that was the best way to show each piece individually. And this slide shows kind of a typical conference room. This is the largest one depicted in this image, but it's the same setup for the tables and chairs that we've been looking at in the smaller ones as well. And again, it's the actual carpet and paint color, so you can kind of see the overall image that we're looking at. And then this slide just kind of shows a blend of how everything works together. Here's the existing, or I'm sorry, what the new carpet and new fabrics and paints would all look like together. And I did want to touch on a little bit, we've been looking at budget as we've been going through. We looked at, you know, a few different lines in the beginning. For the bulk of the furniture, it's made up of case goods, training room furniture. So we looked at, you know, 3 price points and kind of went forward with the mid-range option because it was something that offered those extended warranties and the image that we were trying to achieve at a good price point. So I think in the memo that went out, it listed the budgets per floor, and the ground floor number actually includes the install and delivery for all 3 floors together. So that's why that number looks a little higher than what the furniture you're seeing is. It's because it includes all of the installation as well. And those numbers were preliminary, and we've been working through discussions with the staff to kind of make sure everything we're showing is going to meet their needs. And I think we're within like 5% of where we would be with the final number. The last set of quotes that we put together, the increase was about a $12,000 total from that $269,000 number, which is just under a 5% increase. And that's based on all of the furniture we're showing being brand new within the space. So I guess I want to turn it over if there's any questions. I kind of went through that pretty quickly, but.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I'll start out with, I guess, a fairly simple question. I know, I think the term that Council President uses is we're not trying to build the Taj Mahal here, but the one thing that I think is important, the most important thing, are the actual chairs.
Mhm.
So has anyone that is involved in making the decisions on these actually sat in these chairs and made sure they're comfortable for 8 hours and they're good chairs to use?
So we did have some models of the seating delivered to the site for people to test out. So we had a couple different options of the task chairs, which is what everyone's sitting in their desk at all day long, and then the guest seating as well. And I think we left them there for maybe a couple weeks for people to test out. And then based on, it seemed like the decisions were pretty unanimous. Barb can speak to that a little bit more, but we went ahead with where the agreement was.
Yeah, I can add to that. As Connie indicated, there were 2 examples of the task chairs, 2 of the chairs to be used in the training room. Essentially, we put out kind of vote sheets and allowed the employees who are going to be either at 56 West currently or will be at 56 West to basically express their preference. And there was a pretty clear indication in both cases of which chair the staff preferred.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's what matters most. I mean, I know we're looking at this in terms of right now how it looks and what it costs. But if you get a desk and you're not totally happy with your desk, you can live with it. But I just want to make sure everyone's going to be comfortable in their chairs before we discuss the nitty gritty of the costs and all those things. So I'm glad that we did that. I think that's important because if you buy chairs based on how they look, I don't know if that's the best way to buy a chair. So I'm thank you for going to that extent to test them out. That's all I had, Mr. President.
Yeah,
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I know, President
Ms.
Pecker,
Matthews?
yeah, that we do have some employees who have expressed a desire to keep their current chair. I know of at least one staff member that the department director shared with me that they have significant back issues. Apparently the city made a sizable investment in a chair for that staff member. So there probably will be some specific instances where an employee may have a back issue or a neck issue, and they may just choose to keep the chair they have because of that.
Right. Well, that certainly sounds reasonable. Well, Ms. Kumar, thank you for the presentation. Is it possible to get a copy of the PowerPoint shared with our city clerk so she can distribute it to the members of the elected body?
Of course.
Great, thank you. I had a request from a council member for that. So is there, are there any questions for Ms. Kumar? Or anything anybody needs more information on? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and get into any issues or discussion we need to do, because I think, if I'm correct, Ms. Matthews, the goal is to make a decision tonight so that we can get these things ordered in time for what is our new move-in date, which is now what, sometime in the middle or towards the end of January?
It'll probably be, yes, right now the project completion date for construction is December 28th, as we'll be discussing later. There are a few items that are pending. That's substantial completion, so we probably expect that Warner Construction will vacate the premises more or less around February 1st. Furniture has a fairly long lead time, thankfully not as much when Ms. Kumar checked as she and I initially feared, but we probably are looking at a 6 to 8 week time frame. So we would like to go ahead and place the order if we can get direction from the mayor and common council this evening to do so.
Okay. All right, so I'll open the floor to any comments, discussion. Mr.
President,
Mr. Cavacci.
I guess my only comment would be I would like to show my appreciation for it. It seems to me like staff has done a good job of being conservative with the funds. I know when we first looked at this back quite some time ago, the number was significantly higher that we were talking about for furnishing the new office space. And I know I probably reacted pretty viscerally and negatively at that number. And I'm appreciative of the fact that it looks like a good sharp pencil was taken out, and that number's significantly less than what we initially, I think, were looking at, probably almost half. And I think the stuff looks fine. I think it looks workmanlike. I think that's important. To the mayor's point, using your phrase, we're not building Taj Mahal, but we do want stuff that works. And it's going to last. It looks to me like that's been accomplished while keeping the budget in mind. We're building a pretty expensive, doing a pretty extensive renovation of this property, and putting a bunch of junk furniture in there certainly, I think, would take away tremendously from it. So I think we've struck a good balance here. I'm pleased with what I'm seeing, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cavacci. Anyone else wish to be heard? Okay, well, hearing no one else, I guess we should have a vote. Can I have a motion to authorize the staff to move forward with placing the order for these for this package?
I'll move, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cavacci. Is there a second to Mr. Cavacci's motion?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Yingling. There's been a motion by Mr. Cavacci, second by Mr. Yingling, to authorize moving forward with this. Any further discussion? Questions?
Oh, you probably got the two toughest on the council as your motion and your second, so I think we're in good shape.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Thank you, Mr. Cavacci. Hearing no further discussion, move on to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it. There you go, Ms. Matthews. You can move forward. Ms. Kumar, thank you again very much for doing a very thorough job on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, very good. So I'll move on now. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. We have five items on the consent calendar. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
The motion by Mr. Dayhoff and a second by Mr. Yingling, was it, I think? All those, well, I didn't catch it. Sorry, I was looking at the agenda for a moment. All those in favor of approval of the consent calendar, please say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it. and the consent calendar is approved. Next is report from the mayor. Mr. Mayor.
No report tonight, Mr. President. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. On the COVID-19 pandemic update, I believe we have a report from the chief.
Good evening, everyone. Just, I'm sure everybody's seen on the news that the governor did modify some of the, mainly the maximum occupancy restrictions. Today, the governor did announce that they're going to have a statewide compliance, education, and enforcement operation staffed by members of the state police. So that is going to be effective Wednesday evening, will take place through the holiday season. Locally, we are fielding some executive order violation complaints. Typically, it's individuals, mask related, and almost universally, there's compliance prior to us getting there, and if not, then when we arrive. So we've had a few business-related complaints, but the same thing, immediate compliance upon our arrival on the scene. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Chief. We'll move on now to reports from standing committees. And we'll begin with a report from a liaison to the Carroll County Arts Council, Mr. Dayhoff.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sadly, as a result of the latest pandemic-related restrictions from state government, the Arts Council has had to cancel 2 upcoming events that we were all really looking forward to seeing. That was the Third Wednesday Jazz Series concert has been canceled, and a Christmas Carol, the musical, has been canceled. I would have also liked to have seen a Charlie Brown Christmas, but apparently we're not going to be able to do that either. So we'll get through this by working together. But that'll be all my report for the moment for the Arts Council, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right, what's happening with the Festival of Reeds?
I don't know. I looked quickly before the meeting, and I thought that perhaps they were going to do it online, but I wasn't able to confirm that. I apologize.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just to interject, I don't mean to during council comments, of course, but I did see that they are going to be holding that online. They're going to do some online or virtual Festival of Wreaths, and hopefully we can all get out and get our wreaths, because we still put our, you know what, we keep that wreath up year round because it's not as Christmassy, but they're going to do something online.
Great. I'll look forward to seeing that then.
Thanks for the assist, Mr. Mayor.
I just saw something yesterday about it. So.
Oh, okay. I missed it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Economic and Community Development Committee, Mr. Yingling.
No report this evening.
All right, thank you. And I have nothing from the Finance Committee. Ms. Gilbert, anything from the Personnel Committee?
No, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. How about the Public Safety Committee? Mr. Cavacci.
I have a couple things, Mr. President. So as I think we've probably briefly alluded to a couple of times over the past couple of meetings, the chief has been working very diligently in reviewing, modifying, and adding to our use of force policies and our de-escalation policies. He's worked closely with Sheriff DeWeese and State's Attorney Leonardo in drafting some of these documents. Actually, I think he's taken quite a leadership role in it countywide in terms of looking at these policies and improving upon them, adding to them, maybe taking some things out of them. And part of that includes some significant education and training of personnel to improve upon, the interaction with the public. It's been obvious, I think, to everyone that since the chief's come on board, he's worked very hard to increase the community policing efforts, and we see that regularly and get a lot of positive feedback. But in regards to the de-escalation policies and the use of force policies, he's put things together, kind of gotten them into a pretty final stage at this point, and then decided him and I worked together, and we decided to convene the Public Safety Advisory Committee, which is now operating pretty much on an ad hoc basis, which Councilwoman Gilbert's also part of. We met last Wednesday on the 17th and spent a fair amount of time going in detail through the policies. And Councilwoman Gilbert, certainly if you wanted to weigh in on this at any point, please, feel free, even though I know it's, just a report. But I think that everyone on the committee felt positively, very positively about what we saw and heard. There was a little feedback from some of the members of the committee related to some minor edits and changes that I think the chief appreciated. It was an opportunity for him to get this in front of the public and get input from that committee, which on the committee, there's a number of different organizations and just general public that's represented there, of course, as well as Councilwoman Gilbert and myself. And in the end, there was a move to unanimously support it from the committee's perspective. Obviously, the committee doesn't have any actual, legislative ability or any real power to make decisions, but we all agreed that it was important that from a community perspective that there was a show of support for what the chief is doing here. And I felt that, that took place. Councilwoman Gilbert, I don't know, do you want to weigh in at all? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to say anything about, what we did and what the outcome was, please feel free, if that's okay, Mr. President.
Certainly.
Thanks, Councilman Kawachi. Yes, he is correct. The chief did a great job. He incorporated many aspects in the policy and included things that are kind of in the forefront of a lot of people. He included a lot of collaboration with our community organizations. He included the fact that our police department does a wonderful job collaborating with CIT and with our mental health professionals, so that when they go out on calls, they do a overall great encompassing collaboration with everybody, so they can basis and do a good job for our citizens. So I think the chief did an excellent job with his new policies, and I'm of all the work that went into it.
And given Councilwoman Gilbert's, profession and training and background, she was able to weigh in, during the course of the meeting and give some good input, specifically regarding to a few of those things she discussed that are her areas of expertise. So it was good. It was really, I think all of you would have been really impressed. And I know I left that meeting feeling real good about where we are. I think we're very fortunate to have the police department that we do, not just the chief, but all the leadership within the department and the rank and file officers. We're very lucky, but that doesn't happen just by chance. That happens because of these type of efforts. And I think this is a great step in the right direction. So I wanted to make sure that the rest of you were up to speed on this, and that's what we're doing. The chief probably can weigh in during his report if he chooses to, in terms of when these things are going to go into into force. I think there was some dates that were on the documents that we saw, and it's soon. The only other part of my report is we did have 3 new cruisers that went on the street, so that's exciting. It's money we allocated through the budget to make that happen, so it's always nice when we get some new police cars out there on the street. I know the troops certainly appreciate that. That's all I have, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cavacci and Ms. Gilbert, and Chief, thanks to you and your team for the good progress we continue to make with the police department. I think it's going well, and I think it's noticed. Public Works Committee, Mr. Yingling.
No report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Recreation and Parks, Mr. Dehoff.
I'll defer to Director Gruber for that report, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. For the Technology Committee, I'll just report that the committee had its first meeting, had good conversations with the staff and some updates on some important initiatives, including maintaining the security of Westminster's internal technologies that we're using for the city staff. Hope all of you all are continuing to pay attention to the updates you get and from the requests from the staff to do the trainings and things like that. But they're doing a good job of making sure that we're making sure that our system remains safe from some of the attacks that other municipalities have had to suffer. We also had a good conversation about the expansion of the fiber network outside the city limits and the progress that is being made on that. Looking forward to continuing to dig in deeper with the committee on those subjects. I'll move on now to council comments and discussion. See if anybody has anything they'd like to add that wasn't part of their committee reports. We'll start with you, Mr. Cavacci. Anything from you? All right, thank you. Mr. Dayhoff?
Two brief things, Mr. President. One, sadly, Saturday was the last day for the Westminster Farmers Market, and we really have to send out a big a lot of thanks to all the hard work of Dr. Becker and Brooke Haggerty on the farmers market. They really turned the lemon into a lemonade this year as far as a lot of the pandemic restrictions and things like that. They did a great job. It was something that I look forward to every Saturday. We see a lot of the familiar faces, and we talk to a lot of people who really appreciate how well the Westminster Farmers Market is administered. The other quick thing is, speaking of Christmas traditions that are being held online, and again, I want to thank the mayor for helping me out with that assist on the Festival of Wreaths, but also the Festival of Trees. That's the annual event that's done by Shepherd staff. Shepherd staff does a really good job for our local citizens, and they're going to do the Festival of Trees online this year, and that's going to be beginning on November the 27th, and it's going to close on December the 6th. And if you go to the Shepherd staff website, it's www.shepstaff.org. If you go there, you can find the appropriate link to the Carroll County Festival of Trees. I believe that's all of my report, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayhoff. Ms. Gilbert? All right, nothing from Ms. Gilbert. Mr. Yingling?
Nothing this evening, sorry.
All right, thank you. I'll interpret your head shake as a no. Mr. Yingling?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on now to bids. We have 3 bids tonight.
Mr. President?
Oh, yes, Mr. Mayor.
I would say thing, again, interrupting council comments. But after I made the comment about the Arts Council, which I did hear correctly that they're going to have a virtual online event for that, I went on their Facebook page, saw some mildly conflicting information. So I sent some messages to the executive director and the Arts Council themselves. They just got back to me. The plan right now, which could change, is they are having that so that everyone can enjoy it from home if they want to, but they are still planning on having a socially distanced in-person event between November 27th and December 6th between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. So as of now, that's the plan. So they're doing both. So when they announced that and I saw that that's not its own silo, it's 2 things. So I just wanted to correct myself before we got too far down the road.
All right, well, we do not want to be the source of misinformation or disinformation. So
fact check myself.
I appreciate your checking yourself there. So we'll look forward to doing it one way or the other. So again, back to bids. The first item is the purchase of a replacement truck for the street department. And for that, we will turn to Mr. Glass.
Yes, sir. The city's 2021 capital fund budget allocates funding for the replacement of trucks and some equipment for the street department. This proposed purchase is for the last vehicle out of that bundle. The requested vehicle is available through a contract between the state of Maryland and Apple Ford, as we're become accustomed to using those, piggybacking on those existing contracts. And we're fortunate that our procurement code allows us to do that. The vehicle being purchased is a F-350 Super Cab. It's complete with a utility body and snow plow. Further information is provided in the attached quote if we're so interested to see that. The cost of the vehicle is $42,550, which includes all of the selected options. At this point, the staff would recommend that the mayor and council authorize the purchase of this replacement truck from Apple Ford in Columbia, Maryland, in the total amount of $42,550. And I'll answer any questions if you may have some.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Glass.
Mr. President, just
Mr. Kavachi.
Mr. President, just one quick comment. I'm blown away by that price, Mr. Glass. I will tell you, I have an F-350, and it's getting long in the tooth. And I've been looking a little bit, and I can't believe how inexpensive that is, especially with plow and utility bed. That's just amazing. That's my only comment.
All right. Thank you, Mr. May I have a motion on this?
So moved.
Thank you. Motion
Second.
from Mr. Yingling, second from Mr. Kavachi. Any further discussion? Can you get one from Mr. Kavachi as well at that price? Just kidding.
I don't think we can do that, but
I don't think we can either. Hearing no further discussion, we'll move on to the vote. All those in favor of approving Mr. Glass's truck, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, the ayes have it. There you go, Mr. Glass, you get your truck.
thank you, sir.
Sure. And now we'll turn to Ms. Gruber for a bid on the Durbin House.
Yes, good evening. As you may remember, the city received a grant award in the amount of $50,000 from Maryland Historic Areas Authority for a historic structure assessment of the Durbin House located at Wakefield Valley Park. Required matching funds will be provided by the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. The study of the Durbin House will provide a comprehensive assessment of the current condition of the Durbin House and its potential uses in conjunction with Wakefield Valley Park. The study results will provide an important framework for the future planning and restoration efforts, as well as identification of adaptive reuse opportunities for the Durbin House. On August 27th, 2020, the city issued requests for proposals for this project. We received submissions from 9 architectural and engineering firms. Based on staff's review of the 9 proposals and interviews with the 2 finalists, staff believes that the proposal of Grove and Dololio Architects in the amount of $47,000 best meets the city's needs. The firm provided a well-rounded and comprehensive project approach and has extensive knowledge of tourism, visitor center design, and historic site interpretation. Grove and Dololio Architects has an extensive background in conducting similar successful historic structure assessments, many of which have taken place in Maryland. The firm's references spoke favorably of their expertise and experience in providing the city with a comprehensive roadmap to protect the future of the Durbin House and maximize its public benefit. With that said, staff recommends that Common Council award a contract to Grove and Dololio Architects for a historic structure assessment of the Durbin House in the amount of $47,000 and authorize the mayor's execution of the same.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gruber. We have a motion on this.
I make a motion that we approve the
Award of the contract.
award of the contract. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll second that, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Dayhoff. So we have a motion from Ms. Gilbert and a second from Mr. Dayhoff to approve the grant, the contract, award of the contract under the grant. Any questions for Ms. Gruber or any discussion on this?
I actually do. So I'm just curious. I saw the Ms. Gruber. I saw such a wide range of prices, and I'm just curious what the huge amount of difference, and if you could even say, between 12,000 and 50,000. That is a huge varying degree in bid amounts.
That's correct. Again, it came down to assessment and understanding of the scope of the work that we wish to have accomplished on the Durbin House. And so when you see those extreme amounts on either end of the spectrum, it just usually comes down to a firm's comprehensive understanding of really what our goals and desires are for this particular project. So there were just items missing from some of the lower end bid amounts, as opposed to then some of the higher end bid amounts were far too comprehensive for what we're really looking for at this very primary stage of identification of structure and adaptive reuse.
Well, and on that, I'd say that if you look at the low bid at only 12,000 is a real outlier. And then the second lowest was, it was a bit low, but from a local firm. And then the rest were pretty well clustered, actually. There were only a few thousand different. So that's, I think that's, sounds like we're getting what we want at the lowest price there, which is probably good. I have a question, if Ms. Gruber. So, help me understand, if the grant is for up to $50,000, I guess. The grant is for $50,000.
Correct.
And there was a match required.
Yes.
I'm not sure how much the match was.
So the grant from Maryland Historic Areas Authority was $25,000 with a matching requirement of $25,000.
Okay, that explains it. Because I was going to say if the grant was for 50, I was wondering what was going to happen with the balance of the funds, but that explains it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Gruber or any other comments on this?
Mr. President.
Mr. Cavacci.
So just getting back briefly to the differences, kind of sort of dovetailing a little with Councilwoman Gilbert's questions, particularly pertaining to Dean Camlin's bid. Obviously, he's local right here in downtown Westminster. All else being equal, my preference would be to use somebody here that's here in town. And he was the second lowest bid. So can you tell me a little bit, Ms. Gruber? I'm not asking you to go into extensive detail, but why? What was it that made you choose the next higher up bid, which was both about 15,000? It looks like more than his bid, as well as they're from Winchester, Virginia versus Westminster.
Correct. One of the standouts for Grove and D'Aleo was the fact that they have extensive experience in basically historical interpretation, visitor center design, and adaptive reuse of historic structures into park environments. So certainly if that is something that we are seriously contemplating for the future of the Durbin House, it seemed that they had extensive experience in that particular area of design and reuse.
And Camlin does not?
The proposal did not speak strongly to that as an experienced track record. So I can't say yes or no, but certainly the information contained within the proposal did not speak to the extent of adaptive reuse and visitor center design that Grove and D'Aleo did. So.
And I guess you can't, okay. And there's no back and forth when we do this. That you present what you present, and that's the end of it.
No, this is coming forth to you as a recommendation. So certainly can deny my recommendation by.
Well, no, I think what Mr. Cavacci is asking about, once the bids come in, you don't go back and do a negotiation. With,
I value your opinion greatly, Ms. Gruber. You know that, and I don't want this to be perceived as me questioning your ability to pick the best person here. But I guess what I'm getting at is, they're a local firm right here in Westminster, and their price was lower, and I just want to make sure we're going into this with our eyes wide open in terms of his ability not to do the things that this firm from Virginia is capable of doing, and that we're not overlooking potentially the fact that maybe he just didn't. And I've had no discussion with anybody. This is the first I learned of this when we got this council packet, and I haven't talked to anyone about it. So I don't really have a clue what Dean Camlin's abilities or lack of abilities are when it relates to this. I just would hate to see us not keep work local, especially when it's a lower bid, without maybe, and I don't know what the legalities of our ability to have a conversation to say, hey, you didn't talk about these things. Can you show us that you have this experience, or can you show us that you are able to do some of these things that we're looking to have done? And if the answer is satisfactory, certainly I would opine that we should keep it local and for less money. I guess that's my input.
Thank you, Mr. Kavachi. I think that approach makes a lot of sense, in general. I think in this case, and I have great respect for Mr. Camlin's ability as an architect, and he's certainly done a lot of great work that I'm aware of, but, I just don't know that this is his forte, and that we've got a firm here who does, make a practice of this kind of work. I think is probably, of course, I didn't participate in the bid evaluation either, but that's just from my experience of procurement, how these decisions usually come about.
President?
Mr. Mayor.
So, I'm in this along the same line of thinking as Councilman Kavachi on this. I have a question first. Ms. Gruber, so obviously, you've made your recommendation. I guess question for me is, in your recommendation, how far off would you place your recommendation from? We'll use Dean Camlin as an example. Like how strongly is your recommendation for that firm over Camlin's?
Again, it's a firm that specializes in historic structures, assessments, historic structure reports, and adaptive reuse. So I feel uncomfortable speaking about one firm over the other, but I would maybe venture to guess that Mr. Camlin probably is more of a general architect, and this firm is actually built to respond to this exact type of request, historic structures, assessments, and reports, and then basically phasing and staging the work that would need to be accomplished in order to protect and reuse that particular structure. So that's the best that I can answer your question this evening.
I mean, look, I just wanted to ask because, if your answer was very strong and here's why, and I would highly advise against not doing this, I just wanted to see kind of where you are. And it sounds like you're kind of in the middle. I mean, it doesn't sound like you're making a super strong suggestion in either direction, but I appreciate your suggestion. I guess the thing that I'm thinking about, and I don't know how much everyone else here in this meeting has participated or viewed this, but when I attended Historic District Commission meetings, it was clear that the person that everyone looked to with questions and knowledge about those things was Mr. Camlin. And the only reason he's no longer on the Historic District Commission is because he no longer owns property within the city. And I think everyone misses him very much from that. So I just wanted to make that statement because I do think in the context of this specific bid, he may have some expertise that maybe people just weren't aware of. So I wanted to say that he was the go-to person. 9 times out of 10, if someone had a question about something, they all kind of looked to him during those meetings. And the other thing is, I always look at situations like this and say, is this person or does this firm look better than this firm because they're the better firm for the job, or are they better at selling themselves to me? And sometimes that happens too. But I don't think, I will say this, I don't know Dean that well. I think he's a very good architect. I don't know if he's a natural salesman. So I look at this and I say that, I lean to keeping it local with someone that we absolutely know does a good job. And you're probably right. I think he is a generalist. So I think you're correct on that. And if this firm really does specialize in this particular field, that should be weighed very heavily. So I agree with that too. I think they're both important. I did look into that firm. It didn't appear like the things that they're presenting as what they focus on. it doesn't look like that's a main focus of theirs. Now, if depending on how big they are, they could have done a lot of work in that field. But I just want to put my 2 cents in. I think it's important to know the context, his work on the Historic District Commission before he moved out of the city. But I think, I think he brings some things to the table here that no one else would bring. But it sounds like the other firm does too. So I just wanted to say my piece. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other thoughts on this?
Mr. President,
Ms. Gilbert.
I know Ms. Gruber has spent a lot of time looking over the bids and trying to weigh all of them. And I know that's very time consuming and takes its own expertise in and of itself. Is it possible? Because I think many of us do like to keep business local and whenever we really, really can. Not to say that this particular company is not quite capable and doesn't have quite the impressive report here. Could we possibly see Mr. Camlin's bid, or I don't? I'm just kind of asking. Do we have to just bid on what's recommended, or can we take a peek at the other, or kind of educate me? How does that work?
Am I up?
Go ahead, Ms. Levan. I think you're best able to offer some advice on this.
In a contract like this, it would be defeating the purpose of a competitive bid requirement to open the bids and then give one of the bidders a sort of second bite at that apple. You could, reject all of the bids and let everybody bid again if you wanted to. Or you could view it as professional services. I think it's a little far-fetched in this case, but you could view it as professional services, in which case you could negotiate with anybody you like.
Mr. President.
Mr. Cavacci.
So 2 things. Number one, thank you, Ms. Levin. I think these are professional services because we're not getting a tangible product out of this. I mean, this is an assessment and a review and recommendations in terms of what we're going to do with this building. They're not building anything. They're not even. I don't believe we're even asking him to render full architectural design build, plans or anything of that nature. I think this is more along the lines, very much so, of a professional service. And to that end, I think, as we have done numerous times with professional services, we do get into a discussion with those firms to see if the needs can be met, through this process. And then 2 quick other things of note. I think the mayor brought some great points up. Mr. Camlin is unquestionably somebody in the community that all of us look to when it comes to historic significant structures. He still leases space inside the city, even though he did sell his building. He lives right outside of the city, but his business is located inside the city limits. And I guess I'm just going to put a fine point on it. I really would like to see us give him every opportunity to get this business. And I don't feel like it's a stretch because he was the second lowest bidder. So we're not necessarily trying to say, hey, he was the highest bidder, but I still want to go look at him. I mean, his bid was under the one that we're seeing as a recommendation, and he's got all these other things going for him. So, and I know, Ms. Gruber, you have a full plate, and I know, to Ms. Gilbert's point, I'm sure you spent a lot of time looking at this, and I have zero doubt that there's no question this firm that you're recommending will do a good job. I have zero doubt about that. So I don't want you to think for 1 second that has anything to do with that. And for me, it has everything to do with the fact that he's local. He has a lot of intimate local historic knowledge. And I would go as far as to say, even let's assume for a second, he doesn't have quite as many projects that this other firm has under its belt related to these types of things. As long as he has the ability to do it, why not help him get a project under his belt that could also potentially help a local firm in the future get other projects like this? And if we can do that, I think we're accomplishing a whole lot of good. And if we can't, and at the end of the day, we've done what we can, but it's just not going to work, then I'll get behind that. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Mr. Yingling.
So I guess my thought is I think that everybody's made some excellent points here, but I don't know that, frankly, I'm a little uncomfortable with the way this discussion is going just because we've already made a public bid for this. We outlined, or staff outlined, what it is we were looking for. Mr. Herber has articulated, why, maybe to varying degrees of satisfaction amongst the council. And like just kind of going then saying, oh, well, maybe we should just go back and like sole procure it or whatever. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. So I just think that at this point, maybe we either say, okay, we're going to reject her, recommendation and then move on from there. But I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the way this discussion is going. So that's all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Yingling. Any other comments on this?
Mr. President.
Mr. Dayhoff.
Who made the motion? Did Councilwoman Gilbert make the motion?
I believe she did.
And I seconded it.
I believe that's the case.
I've been involved in discussions in the past in which we did not accept the recommendation of staff. The buck stops with us. I wonder if maybe we want to withdraw the motion and take another look at this.
Well, we have,
Your motion?
Well, so from a parliamentary standpoint, I would say this. The council needs to, at this point, because it has been properly moved and seconded, you can't just withdraw the motion. We have to vote.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Withdraw the motion.
That's
The
what I
second
thought.
thing
Okay.
Is that I believe that the correct course would be, we do have a motion to accept the bid. And so I think, as Ms. Levan has advised us, perhaps the correct path, if you don't want to do this, is to just vote no.
Yeah.
To reject the bid.
And then can we make another motion at that point in time?
Another motion could be made at that time, yes, after.
Okay. I call the vote.
Well, all right. So did anybody else have any discussion on this? I don't think I had. Let me just be clear. So before we move on. So Ms. Levan, so assuming for the moment that the council might reject the bids, what path would be available to us tonight, as opposed to going back and having staff revisit the issue? Is one preferable to the other?
Well, so looking back through the package, I will say that I concur with Councilman Cavacci that in fact it is a professional services contract, and that is a contract that you could have simply negotiated in the beginning. And so I would say in this case, you could vote the motion to accept this proposal down, if that is council's will. And then you can have further discussions really with any of the entities or someone else entirely. Obviously that's gonna push your schedule back, but you would be within your legal parameters to do that.
Right. And it is not possible, in your view, to merely change the motion to, instead of accepting the staff recommendation, to award the bid to a different candidate?
Yeah, you could. No, you could do that.
All right. So one solution would be, if somebody cared to make the motion, that we amend the motion to, instead of accepting the award, to awarding the bid to the recommended candidate, to award it to one of the other submissions instead. Is that correct?
You could. I mean, I think your problem here is, if I understood Ms. Gruber correctly, there were some. I'm sorry.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Before Mr. Cavacci, can I just get the rest of Ms. Levan's answer first?
Yeah, it's going to be what I was going to say, but go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. if I understood Ms. Gruber correctly, there were some issues that needed to be fleshed out with respect to the Camlin and Associates proposal.
All right, so perhaps the best path would be to just reject the bids and do a separate negotiation.
Yeah, you could adopt a motion in favor of negotiating with Camlin and Associates for these services.
Mr. President, can I ask Ms. Gruber, are we on a particular time frame with this bid? Does this, if it does not get awarded this evening, do we have a particular time frame that would affect this project and or the grant amount? If we would say amend the motion and award it to Dean Camlin in light of maybe some questions being answered, would that cause us to lose this bid because of time?
I suppose that the answer would depend upon how quickly then council action would occur after that decision is made, and then execution of the contract, so on and so forth, all of the items that need to fall into place after a different decision would be made this evening. So
because there is a time frame that we have to be cognizant of, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I actually have a grant report due tomorrow, and the only status or the only shall I say progress that we've made on the project since its award is that I was going to report perhaps that there was a recommendation made to council and it was either endorsed or denied. So yes, there is a trajectory that we need to follow in order to still be eligible for reimbursable funds this particular project. So we're still within the window of time. I just don't know how long it would take if a different decision was made this evening and what that would do to the timeline of the project, because I've never been through this before. So I don't know what amount of time it adds to the process.
Right. Well, it's a little bit of new ground for all of us, I think. So my question would be, Ms. Gruber or Ms. Levan, or whoever can answer this, does the Maryland Historic Areas Authority have a requirement that this work be competitively bid, or do they allow us to do a professional services negotiation as is being suggested?
I don't know if Ms. Gruber knows the answer to that. I don't. I would suspect that they would require you to use your regular procedures for the award of a like contract, and your charter allows you to do a negotiation for professional services. However, to answer your question properly, I would have to take a look at MHT regulations.
Okay.
Mr. President.
I think that's an important factor. Mr. Cavacci.
I agree with you. Given that I kind of started us down this path with my comments, I'd like to say a couple things related to it. Number one, I want everyone to keep in mind this bid from Dean Camlin was $15,000 less than the bid that was received from the recommended firm. So we're not trying to force anything in terms of spending more money to keep it local. It's less money to keep it local. So I want to be clear on that from the public perspective, that his bid was lower than all the other bids, with the exception of one that we all probably can assume, given how incredibly low that bid was, did not include anywhere near the services that were needed. Number two, I would strongly recommend that we do not just award this to Mr. Camlin, even though I'm advocating that we give him a strong look at it because he had the lower price and he's local. I do believe that we need to have conversations to see if, in fact, he's capable of doing the things that Ms. Gruber would like to accomplish through this process. And I think we owe it to her to have that opportunity to go back and have those conversations and make the assessment if, in fact, he can do it. or if in fact he can't, and he may say that he can't do some of these things. Ms. Gruber may meet with him and he may say, hey, I don't have the proper staff to do a couple of these things. That's why my bid was $15,000 less, because I wasn't going to do some of the things that this other firm was going to do. Or he may say, yeah, that was all included and I should have articulated that and I am capable of doing it. But I would like to see us allow Ms. Gruber to go back and have a conversation with him, as it sounds to me like we're completely within our rights to do. Again, given the fact that he was the lower bid, I think I don't want to lose sight of that either. So I'm recommending, Mr. President, that we simply reject it and then use this as maybe our guidance to Ms. Gruber to go back, have a conversation or two, and come back to us in a quick time. And I'm sure Mr. Camlin will be responsive. And if in fact it's just not there, well, then we move forward with her recommendation of the other firm.
Well, so I would say, I understand that suggestion. I'm not sure that we can reject the bids and then just move forward, with a bid that we've already rejected. I think we would have to rebid it at that point, and we would have to see what the prices would be like. So I think maybe a better alternative, because we have some questions around, what the requirements are of the grant in terms of whether or not it had to be competitively bid or some other procurement method could be allowed. And we also have some questions about, what Mr. Camlin's capabilities are under this grant. Why don't we postpone this item? Because I don't know that the bids are going to expire in the next 2 weeks. Why don't we postpone this disposition of this until the next meeting and give staff a chance to come back to us with some answers to some of these questions, and we'll be in a better position to make an informed judgment at that time. If that's acceptable to everybody, I think that would probably be the safest path for us to pursue.
Mr. President, will that
Ms.
not
Gilbert.
delay the bid and the grant if we wait till our next council meeting? Because that's actually 3 weeks away.
Well, it would delay moving. We weren't going to be able to move forward in either case. We weren't going to be able to move forward tonight if we do reject the bids. So I don't think that's any delay in what would happen.
I would probably prefer a special meeting if need be, so that we don't lose the grant.
Well, or a special. Well, I don't think that the grant. I don't think the grant's about to expire. I think Ms. Gruber just needs to make a report tomorrow on where things stand. Is that correct, Ms. Gruber?
Yes, I'd actually appreciate the time to review the timeline associated with the grant and the guidelines before discussing anything further from that perspective.
Right. And if Ms. Gruber is available, and now, Mr. Yingling, I see you're seeking recognition. I'll go to you in a second. Perhaps if Ms. Gruber finds herself ready to report back sooner than the next meeting, then she could advise the city administrator, and we could certainly see about having a special meeting to take up the matter earlier than that. Mr. Yingling.
Yeah, so maybe just one more question about this is, Ms. Gruber had said that they ranked these, I guess, from most qualified based on a certain set of parameters or what we were looking for in terms of scope. So, I mean, it would probably be helpful to know, what the rankings were and give us some context of that, whether that's now or in our future discussion.
That I'm sure that's something that she could come back to us with as well, as part of sharing more information with us. So I just think that, I think we'd be better served by having more information, particularly about the ramifications of any action we might take, as opposed to just acting and then finding that we had precluded options for the city. I mean, the bids have been made, the prices are locked in for the moment. We have a little time, I think, to consider this matter, and by not acting, we continue to preserve all of our options. Whereas by acting, I think we lose options. Is my recommendation, is my suggestion to you all. So if that's acceptable, without objection, we will postpone this item until Ms. Levan.
So you've still got a motion on the table?
I understand that, but a motion to postpone is, takes precedence.
I'm sorry, you're correct. But where I was going with this was that just in your discussion, there's been a sort of assumption that if you rejected the staff report, you were rejecting the bid, which I don't think those two things are the same. I think you could vote that motion down if you wanted to and not change the status quo at all.
What, that the bids would still be available to us?
Right. All you would be doing was rejecting the staff recommendation for the award to that entity.
All right. Well, I think that's a distinction without much of a difference in this case, though. So I'm not sure that, you know, we gain anything by doing that and not prejudicing the situation. So without objection, we will postpone this item until the next time the council meets, whether that is a regular meeting or a special meeting. We will await the report of the staff on that. Next item on the agenda is another bid, I think. Sorry, get back to that here. Also to Ms. Gruber for playground equipment at Tahoma Farm Boulder Park.
Yes, grant award from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Community Parks and Playgrounds Program provides funding for the design, procurement, and installation of new playground equipment at Tahoma Farm Boulder Park. Currently, the Boulder Park plays host to an outcropping of artificial rock structures that have deteriorated over time. Options to repair the artificial rock structures have been exhausted, and their replacement is now inevitable. In response to this maintenance need, the city issued a request for proposals for this project on October 9th. Bidders were advised that the total dollar amount available for the project was $75,000 maximum, and they were also given the opportunity to submit up to 3 design alternatives. Seven proposals were received from playground design and installation companies. Staff recommends that the Mayor and Common Council award the bid to Commercial Recreation Products for design option number 1, which was included in your council packet, in the amount of $75,000 for design, procurement, and installation of new playground equipment at Tahoma Farm Boulder Park.
Can I make a motion, Mr. President?
Yes, you may.
I make a motion that we accept staff's recommendation for the design, procurement, and installation of the playground equipment that is recommended at Tahoma Farm Boulder Park.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Is there a second? There's a second from Mr. Cavacci. So it's been moved and seconded to accept the, to award the bid as recommended by staff. Is there any discussion or any questions from Ms. Gruber? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to a vote. All those in favor of awarding the bid, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it and the ayes have it. And the motion's adopted. So that's approved. There you go, Ms. Gruber. Got that one done. Next item on the agenda is ordinances and resolutions. We have one ordinance for introduction tonight, ordinance number 930, an ordinance of the Mayor and Common Council of Westminster repealing subsection K of section 119-4 of the Code of the City of Westminster to omit reference to the Board of Housing Appeals. Ms. Levan.
Yeah, so this is basically a cleanup ordinance. You had previously deleted the housing board, which was an entity you had never really created or staffed, or I don't know what the word is.
Appointed.
Oh, right. But when we did that, and I will take responsibility for this, we did not delete an identical reference to it that's actually in section 119-4 itself at the very end. So it's just really doing the exact same thing you've already done, only making everything match.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion for introduction?
I'll make that motion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dayhoff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Cavacci. Any discussion?
Is Mr. President, is this the
Mr.
one,
Dayhoff.
Mr. President, is this the one that we enacted with the property maintenance ordinance 662? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. I mean,
I don't know what the number was. I remember
Yeah.
I remember the conversation. I remember the action.
I remember.
I don't
too.
remember the code.
I remember we appointed folks to it.
Oh, you mean originally?
Yeah.
I
Back in 2001. It's all good. It's all good.
For me.
If you want to, yeah, we can clean it up. It's all good. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, move on to a vote. And remember, this is for introduction. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it. And the ordinance is introduced, and we will be bringing this back when, Ms. Levan?
At your next meeting,
is
I
that
would
fine?
imagine. Yeah,
Do we need a hearing on this?
no,
Okay, good. Then let's bring it back the next agenda for this position. Thank you. We have no unfinished business of which I'm aware. Under new business, the first item is approval of an HRI contract, proposed change orders, number 25 and 26. And for that, we'll go to Mr. Glass.
Yes, sir. The fiscal year 21 sewer budget includes, as you recall, I'm sure, $300,000 for the replacement of 4 clarifier control gates and 2 clarifier drive mechanisms. And it also includes, that same money includes the installation of this equipment. Back to what you'll recall again, I'm sure, on September 14th, you'll recall the approval of the sole source procurement for the clarifier control gates. And then on October 26th, the same thing for the replacement of the clarifier drive mechanisms. They were $36,915 for the gates and $98,820 for the drive mechanisms. So what we're looking for this evening is the approval to have this equipment installed. And our idea is to have the existing contractor, HRI, to do this work for us, as opposed to having an outside contractor to come in and the conflicts that would create at the same time. So again, I'm sure you'll recall the earlier purchases that we made for the various equipment. And so then what we have before us is in proposed change orders 25 and 26. One is to install the gates and the other is to install the clarifier drive mechanisms. HRI's pricing is $65,830 for the gates and $97,211 for the drive mechanisms. If this, of course, is approved, what we're looking for is direction this evening. The actual approval will occur in the next change order. Then that would be change order number 4 with HRI. Unfortunately, this work will not be participated in with the ENR grants because it's maintenance kinds of work. We knew this was coming. That's why it was included in the budget, that it was separate from the ENR work. We're in a good position though to use HRI for the installation as well. So again, our budget was $300,000. And by the time we're done with the purchase of the gates, and purchase of the drive mechanisms and the installations of both, our total cost is going to be $298,776. So that's just short of the 300. And at this point, we would recommend that we can move forward with change orders 25 and 26. Total cost to HRI would be $163,041. And that, again, would be included as part of change order number 4 when that is developed. Answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Glass. May we have a motion? Somebody have a motion on this?
I make a motion that we move forward with change orders 25 and 26.
And I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. A motion by Ms. Gilbert and a second by Mr. Dayhoff. Is there any further discussion on this or any questions for Mr. Glass?
Mr. President.
Mr. Cavacci?
So, Mr. Glass, with these change orders, this all goes towards the split with the state, correct? All these are funded in that same percentage, or are these all on us?
No, this is 100% on us because, again, it's not related to the ENR process.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my mistake. Yep, you're right. I apologize. Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cavacci. Any other questions or any other discussion on this? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All those in favor of approving change orders 25 and 26, please say aye.
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 All right. All those opposed? I seem to have it, and the ayes have it. And the motion is approved. And I think, is that? Oh, we have one more, I'm sorry. Pending work items for 45 West Main renovation project. And for that, we'll start with Ms. Matthews and whoever else we need to hear from.
Thank you, President Pecoraro. As you noted earlier this evening, the 45 West Main renovation project is nearing completion. As we've discussed at prior meetings, staff has been attempting to get pricing for any pending work items so we could give you a more complete picture. I did want to mention, and I will try to share my screen, we included in your agenda packet was a listing of both the change orders that you have executed to date, as well as some pending work items. Since the agenda packet was distributed on Thursday, staff did execute change order 18 as approved by the mayor and common council. So I would like to go ahead, President Pecoraro, with your concurrence and just sort of share the screen and
sure, that'd be great.
Give you kind of an updated picture of where we're at. So basically, this is an updated version of the report that was included in your agenda packet. Pages 1 and 2 is a comprehensive listing of the change orders that Mayor and Common Council have authorized execution of to date. Once again, this report has been updated to include change order 18, which was just executed on Friday. As we were putting together the information for your agenda packet, we had a discussion with John Brunette of Gant Brunette Architects and his staff. Mr. Brunette is on the call this evening to try to sort of categorize the various change orders and what their point of origin was. So on the first page, as you'll see, the change orders were categorized by unforeseen conditions, design revisions, and owner discretion. And owner discretion are those items that were not required, but that the city in its discretion determined would be appropriate to do as part of this project. With the addition of change order 18 on Friday, the revised total change orders that have been executed to date are $305,043.52. That represents a 6.9% increase over the original contract value. From a percentage standpoint, the way that these break down is 46% of the change order total was attributable to unforeseen conditions. 27% roughly was attributable to design revisions, and items that were categorized as owner discretion also constitute 27%. So I thought that might give you all maybe some helpful background as to kind of where we've arrived with the various change orders.
That was 46% was
that was attributable to unforeseen conditions.
Unforeseen conditions, right.
So oftentimes, as you may recall, demolition occurred. We found things we weren't expecting to find. Items were found to be in worse condition than originally envisioned. So in some cases, items that were anticipated to remain were unable to do so and had to be replaced.
Right.
So this is the kind of the updated page, which basically reflects items that we hope to talk about tonight. And I'm going to encourage Mr. Glass and Mr. Brunette to please jump in. One addition from your agenda packet is the third item that is listed, which is an access panel in Telecom 007B. In talking to Mr. Brunett's associates, the items that are marked with an asterisk, the first 3 items, are items that will either be required or are highly recommended by the project architect. Those 3 items, the replacement of door 134B, the aluminum vented soffit replacement, and the access panel in telecom 007B, total $5,352.17. None of these 3 items basically have any extended conditions or extended project time associated with them. But I know President Pecoraro, if you'd like to kind of stop at different sections of this or how you'd like us to cover this, we can go through everything and then take questions, or I can kind of take questions as we go along if you'd like.
Why don't we, I think probably as we go along is going to be easier because otherwise we'll probably be interrupted anyway. So let's just
Mr. Burnett,
do
is
it
there
that way.
anything that you would like to add about the first 3 items, which your firm has categorized as either going to be required or at least highly recommended?
Barb, you're not sharing your screen if you are intended to do that.
Oh, sorry about that. Hold on a moment. I apologize.
Barb, I don't see John on here. I think something happened that he must have dropped off somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, he was on earlier, I know.
He was, yes. So I don't know if he lost connection or what happened.
Okay. Well, we will see. Shannon, can you go ahead and share that since I seem to be having some trouble?
Sure.
You don't mind?
Yeah, you'll have to stop sharing, then I can share mine.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so it is up?
Yes.
Yes, it's up.
Showing now.
Okay. I must have had a blip in my internet. Thank you. Shannon, can you maybe email Mr. Brunette and see kind of what happened?
Sure.
So anyway, as I mentioned, the top 3 items are items, as you read their descriptions, they're either items that were found to be in deteriorated condition. Generally, that sort of kind of encompasses the first 2 items. And then the 3rd item, the access panel, which is what was added since the agenda packet went out on Thursday, basically is sort of a code requirement. So once again, those 3 items combined total just under $5,400 and will likely be required. There are no 0 days associated with them. So I think certainly, President Pecoraro, I think staff's recommendation would be that we get your approval this evening to be able to proceed with those 3 items.
All right. Any questions or comments on those 3 items? Is that agreeable to everybody? Unless somebody objects, we'll go ahead. Yes?
Mr. President, I want to make sure I'm looking at the right. Okay, no, you know what? Yeah, okay. Your shared screen has more information than what I had that was in the packet where I'm looking at a different page. Never mind, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I apologize. This was received late this afternoon. So this is, it's largely the same, Councilmember Kovaci, but there has been, like I say, the access panel item was added since Thursday.
Yeah, and there was the one that was waiting on price in my packet. That's what I was going to ask about, but I see it's up there now. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on these? Or any concerns? All right. Go ahead. So those are fine, Ms. Matthews, and you can do that.
With your concurrence, President Pecoraro, I want to kind of jump down to the bottom of the screen just to comment before we go any further. So
sure.
These were the items Mr. Glass may need to help me with, but the first one is ductwork revisions on the first floor. Jeff and I had an email exchange today with Gant Brunette about this. This is an item, I believe work has already been performed because it had to be during to keep the project moving. Basically, Warner has provided a price of just under $16,000, which Gant Brunette has indicated they believe is overly high. So they are currently in negotiations with Warner. So that's the outer limit. But I did want to call to your attention as we start walking through some of the discretionary items. But this is an item that the city will need to compensate Warner for some work. But the question is how much? So the $15,790 is a Warner construction price, but they've been advised by Gant Brunette that the architect feels that that pricing is way too high. So that negotiation is continuing. The Main Street utility unforeseen work. Mr. Glass, would you mind kind of addressing that one? Because I know you have very strong feelings about whether you feel the city has any liability for that matter.
Sure. Part of the project, the Warner had a sub that was doing the utility work. That's just water and sewer, brand new lines that were being brought into the building that basically worked in the same trench. This extra cost that they're claiming of $11,000 is as a result of a duct bank that was a problem for them. It was an obstruction in their excavation, and it caused them to have additional time for flagging and traffic control, some additional bends in the pipe work, etc. Where I take issue with this is that prior to their doing work there in the first place, actually it was a rather uncomfortable time when they were doing work in the street and didn't have any flag work or any traffic control, and I made them leave the job site. I told them at that time that they needed to test pit a number of things in the street, and they were well aware that AT&T duct bank was there and was going to be a problem for them. They knew that. They can't say they didn't know that. I told them I was not the only one. So, and so now that's comes up as unforeseen work, which had they did their homework and test pitted the area in the first place, they would have known what depths they needed to excavate to. The other part of that is the water line, although it had to be under the duct bank, it still wasn't as deep as the sewer line was, that they already had to dig that anyway. So I would not incur that cost of $11,088. I think that's over and above.
Okay.
So I did
And
just
what's the recommendation from our architect?
What Mr. Brunette had indicated on the Main Street utility unforeseen work is that there was at least one item that I guess, I don't think they disagree that there was a lack of control of the subcontractor. Mr. Brunette had indicated there was at least some scope of work that he wanted to discuss with Warner and give them the opportunity to present more information, and that's still pending. Shannon and I are trying to see if we can basically get Mr. Brunette. We're not sure whether he had an internet connection problem or what happened. But I did just want to make you aware that those two items were, kind of hanging out there before we start walking through some of the discretionary items.
The other thing I failed to mention was that the proper procedure was not followed either with this utility work. If there's obstructions involved, then that work should have stopped. There should have been an RFI issued. None of that happened. So I stand by my thought on that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Glass. Any comments on this or questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Cavacci.
Yeah, Mr. Glass is our local resident expert. I think he makes a very compelling argument. I'm not sure what Mr. Burnett would say if he were on the line with us, but I have to say I completely concur, given his description that this should not be on us. This is on them, and I think we've already had one or two little things like this come up, nothing too major, and this certainly isn't major either. It's only $11,000, but at the end of the day, I think we need to dig our heels in here and say absolutely not.
All right. Any other thoughts on this? I'd say I tend to agree with Mr. Glass as well on this. If he gave them a warning on it and they disregarded it, I don't see how we can be held responsible for it.
And we have a progress meeting tomorrow, so we can share that. Like I said, I believe we've already shared that with the architectural firm, and we will reiterate that again.
Right.
So the other items that I'm just sending Shannon Mr. Brunette's cell phone to see what's happening. So the other items that we kind of wanted to walk through are all items that are discretionary, but there may be some efficiencies to be gained from having the work performed as part of this contract. So with your concurrence, President Pecoraro, we'll just sort of walk through these items.
Sure.
And Mr. Davidson may have some comments about the panic buttons. So Dave, feel free to jump in. So the first item is the reconstruction of the air shaft walls. You may recall this from a meeting a number of months ago. We had brought this forward, and the initial thought from staff was to perhaps use some material other than bricks. Councilmember Dayhoff, with his extensive history about the building, which he was kind enough to share, brought to our attention that if any material was used that was somewhat more porous, that we might have an issue with exhaust fumes being pulled into the building from cars idling in the ATM. So there's been a lot of back and forth between Gant Brunette and Warner Construction. So the proposal that is before you this evening basically would keep the masonry structure, but basically any kind of spalled or broken bricks throughout the faces of the air shaft basically would be repaired, and then there would be a continuous aluminum coping installed along the top of the walls. Mr. Glass and I had the opportunity to talk about this item earlier today, just to kind of line up our recommendations, and Mr. Glass, please feel free to jump in. But it would be staff's recommendation that this work be undertaken as part of Warner Construction's contract. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I agree with that. The issues being primarily that the bricks that are in need of repair are no longer in production. So basically you have to scavenge or reclaim them from, tear out in different areas of the building in order to be able to do this anyway. So in the event that we wanted to do this on our own, all that stuff is going to be, I'm sure will not be made available to us at the time that we want to do it. So I really feel like now's the best time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Glass. Any other thoughts on this? Any objections to moving forward? All right. I think that's a no, Ms. Matthews.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we can move forward with that item, President Pecoraro?
Yes, I think so.
The next item, once again, this was something we had talked about months ago before we decided to kind of set everything aside until we could get more pricing for you. Basically was to detergent wash the building exterior. Obviously, it's white ceramic bricks. There's been a lot of dust and everything going on from the construction. Basically, this would be necessary to wash and scrub all the exterior surface on the building with a mild detergent to remove any kind of buildup from the building facade. Has an associated cost of $4,200. Once again, this is a discretionary item, but Mr. Glass and I have talked about this. We can't think of anything worse than basically spending all this money on the building and then before we open it, have it covered basically with all kind of the buildup from the facade. If there were any blemishes or stains that were caused by the contractor specifically during construction, that is their responsibility to remedy. But once again, this is one of the discretionary items that staff would recommend that the mayor and common council approve.
Any questions on this or any thoughts? Is this something we do at the very end after the contractor cleaned up their own, as you mentioned here, any blemishes or issues caused by that's on their responsibility? Would we come back and do this as a follow-on to that?
Mr. Glass, do you know how that would work? I would imagine it would be one of the very last things Warner would do before they exited the site. Would that be the case, Mr. Glass?
Yeah, that's correct. We would instill that thought in their mind. We wouldn't want them to do any pressure washing until they're almost off the site, just because it's
right.
Mess it back up again.
Sure.
So we wouldn't do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, makes sense to me to have a nice, clean, shiny building when we're all done. Anybody have any objections to that? Hearing none, I think you can do that one as well.
Okay, I think I'm going to ask Mr. Glass to maybe address the milling and the repaving and the parking lot lighting. We do have pricing for the milling and repaving of the parking lot. Unfortunately, we were unable to get pricing for the parking lot lighting prior to this evening's meeting. Warner has been working on that, but I thought at least it would be helpful for Mr. Glass to sort of just explain the items and what the options might be.
So with regard to the milling and repaving, the concept kind of follows along the same thinking as washing the building. If we're going to spend that kind of money, or the kind of money that we have spent, the appearance is functionality is what we have to have. The appearance, although, is very important as well, and that's easy enough said from a person that has more of a face for radio, but appearance does, it comes into play all too often. So what we were hoping to do was, because the parking lot really isn't in killer shape. It has some life left to it. It's still going to have to be done, but at some point, but it does have some life left to it. Um, the unfortunate part is, just because of the construction, there's trenching across like from the generator to the building. It traverses the entire back of the parking lot, and then in the areas where they've taken out curb line and reinstalled, there's of course areas around where the asphalt has to meet the new concrete as well. So anyhow, so what we kind of wanted to do was just, if it just looked black again, then that's an appearance thing. The really weren't looking to do the mill and repave at this time, but if it could just be micropaved, was is the process that I was really wanted to go for there. It fills in all the cracks. It'll make it look brand new. Doesn't last forever, obviously, but it provides that appearance that I think you would enjoy. Unfortunately, the micropave process, the contractor that does that is out of Virginia. They're not working in this area right now, so and they may have gotten a little greedy as well on their pricing, but it basically came back so very close to what a full mill and overlay would have been. It was within a few $1,000s that it would almost make more sense, if we were going to spend that kind of money, to just go ahead and mill and overlay the whole parking lot then. So in discussion between Ms. Matthews and myself, then the question kind of came up, well, maybe we should not include this work with under Warner's umbrella, but that we would do it later on our own dime. I guess either way, it's our dime, but later on that we would do it ourselves. So it would depend how long, in my opinion, we waited to do that work, and this is why. If we in the springtime we elected to we bid this work, for instance, and have it as a standalone project, which I would recommend that we would do, to not include it in CJ Miller's work, because it's actually different work, and I'll explain why that is. But in doing so, if we did it ourselves, we would relieve the contractor of any imperfections that he would leave for us. For instance, that trench work that I was talking about earlier, if it were not compacted properly, we could mill and overlay the whole thing and then still have a trench failure, and we couldn't do anything with the contractor at that point. We will have kind of bought the job. So I feel uncomfortable in going that direction. Doesn't mean we can't do it, but if the contractor should be good for his work, and I would hate to relieve him of anything that he should be responsible for under those conditions. The reason I would make it a separate project is, if we did it ourselves, is that the mill and overlay of a parking lot is very different than the mill and overlay of city street. And I'll just give a few examples, and this is why. The work around manholes and valve boxes and storm drain grates is all handwork, and it makes the project go much slower. It makes the project more expensive. So If you can, I'll give you another analogy. If you're just repaving street or road going down 140 where there are no obstructions, there's nothing in the way, you can make put a whole lot of tons down in one day. Conversely, if you did that on Main Street in Westminster, your production may be 10% of what you could do on a clear open highway. That kind of example then fits the same scenario as the parking lot because of the obstruction stuff. So that's the reason I would make that difference of distinction. So we're kind of in a conundrum there. If unfortunately the parking lot work, I forget what it was, right at a little over $40,000, $41,457 it was, and they're looking for 4 additional days as well. I think that might be a little more than maybe what we could get it done for, but I don't think it's going to be a whole lot more than that. And I think for those reasons and the liability of the trench work that I spoke of earlier, I probably would have the contractor do this work as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Glass. Any questions for Mr. Glass?
Mr. President, real quick. Mr. Glass, I want to make sure I understand. You're saying, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Cavacci.
Okay, Mr. President?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, Mr. Glass, you're saying that if we let them do it and they put this 1.5 inch, mill it and put the 1.5 inch down, and then there is a trench failure, then it's on them. If we don't, and it happens after we mess with it, then it's going to be on us. That's what you're saying, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that in and of itself, if we're not really going to save anything, I think that's as good a reason as any just to let them do it at this point.
Okay. I tend to agree with that. I don't hear any objections, so I think we should take that as approval to go ahead.
The next item is the parking lot lighting. And this is one that we can do ourselves at a later time. The lights work for what we have. It's again is an appearance thing, but there's one concrete base that has delaminated and is quite deteriorated. That's one that I am concerned about. I think that if we want to delay this work, it might behoove us to remove that light. Because I'm not sure in the windstorm, like we had today, those gusts and potentially more than that, that's not a liability for us. It's the when you turn in from Bond Street, it's a light pole to the left-hand side there. Yeah. So if we elect not to do this, I would say we on our own then should probably take that light down.
Have you got an estimate on pricing on this, Mr. Glass? I see we're still waiting on the price, it says.
So I do not. Again, Warner was supposed to, and I'm sure they might even have it for tomorrow's meeting. I don't know, but I would say it's going to be, and this, don't hold me to this. I've mentioned to Ms. Matthews, I have the mustache as Nostradamus has, but not his insight. So I would say we're probably in the $8,000 range, maybe.
8,000. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Glass or any thoughts? I mean,
Mr. President, I say we say no.
Say no, right? No from Mr. Cavacci. Any other thoughts?
Mr. President.
Mr. Dayhoff.
Mr. Glass, I would assume that we would install LED lights, correct?
That's correct. That's the idea that in either case, whether Warner did it or we would, LEDs is what would be replaced.
We can't fold this into the big light replacement project that you were telling us about from BGE at a recent meeting?
So the Cobra headlights are, they're owned from the recent meeting. They're owned by BG&E. We rent those. In this case, we would own the fixture itself. And so BG&E, they wouldn't have anything to do with this one under that program. It doesn't mean that there aren't other programs. If you recall in my conversation that 2 meetings ago, that there are some other programs that I'd like to use our savings from the Cobra Head program to use against that. This may fit in something like that.
Mr. Glass, Mr. President. Mr. Glass, so you wouldn't be uncomfortable doing this at a later point in time?
The caveat with that is I would take the single pole down, the one with the deteriorated base. I feel uncomfortable with that base, so I probably would do that. But it could be done at any time. The lights work, with the exception of the base. I am uncomfortable with the base.
And maybe we could use some future cost savings and do it. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm willing to fall on my sword one way or another on this. I mean, I think uniform and consistent is important, and I would like for them to be LEDs. I'd be curious to see what my colleagues have to say.
Mr. Glass, the cost of removing the one that you're talking about is relatively modest, I assume?
Well, I think we can do that ourselves, so.
Okay. All right. There does not seem to be any great desire to get this done. So I think, you know, Mr. Cavacci's position, I think, prevails on this.
Okay, thank you very much. And then, Mr. Davidson, would you like to just, we do not have pricing on this item, and certainly President Pecoraro, if you're going to have a special meeting potentially to deal with the Durbin House assessment, we can always bring this item back to you. But while we have your attention this evening, perhaps Mr. Davidson could address and describe the panic button item. That's
okay.
Good afternoon. The panic buttons would cover the finance area, housing area, and the public seminar room in the basement. This would be if something happens where a situation arises where the staff would be able to hit a button to notify the police to respond. It'll just be more of a safety issue. And I have no idea what this will cost.
All right. What rooms are we talking about? You know, you just mentioned some rooms and
finance.
Numbers. What are we talking
finance
about?
Area. I'm not sure. I think it's on here. The finance area is, I believe, 113.
Yeah, there are, if I may, there are 2 stations, kind of counter stations for finance. I believe what was requested is a panic button at each of those stations in the event that only one staff member is working. And then one in housing, which is in the kind of 1980s add-on, you know, kind of that juts out near the ATM. And then Dave, you might have, I think seminar 018, that's what I believe may be labeled the community meeting room in the lower level. But there would be I
don't know what others think. I'm sympathetic to having these. I think, you know, unfortunately, the times we live in, it's probably a good idea to have them. But you know, I think having a price, you know, so we get some idea of what we're getting into here is a good idea.
Okay, so yes, you can certainly defer that. As Mr. Glass indicated, we have a progress meeting tomorrow morning, so he and I will be able to get an update on you know, where pricing stands on that item. I do know Warner is working on it, and I apologize that we did not have that for you this evening. So I believe, unless there's questions, President Pecoraro, just to sort of recap, it's that the Mayor and Common Council have approved the replacement of the door, the soffit replacement, the access panel, the air shaft walls, washing the building, and the parking lot milling and paving. The cost of those items, if I added them up quickly on my calculator, is $60,271.33, and it would add 4 days to the project completion schedule. So if I have that right, Mr. Glass and I will convey that information to Warner tomorrow morning.
All right, thank you. I guess that concludes
It does, unless there's any
this
questions.
item, correct? Very good. Thank you. All right, very good. Then let's move on now to departmental reports.
I'd like to start with Councilmember Dayhoff, and who usually gives us a report on behalf of the fire department.
Yes, the operational report from the month of October. The total calls for the month of October were 550. 447 of those calls were for EMS. 103 of those calls were for fire. It looks like 53% of the calls were overlapping, in which those are situations in which we got several calls that were concurrent with each other. Let me look over here a little bit. Looks like 303 of the calls were in the city limits. It looks like 211 of the calls were outside the city limits. Total calls for the year look like for 2020, a total of 5,067 calls so far this year. I believe that concludes my report, Ms. Matthews. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dayhoff. I just had a few items this evening, just as a reminder. Our new Director of Human Resources, Ray McCullough, will be joining our city staff as of tomorrow. As the Mayor and Common Council are aware, our outgoing retiring HR Director, Darlene Childs, stepped down from full-time work in early August and kindly agreed to continue to work part-time to help us during the transition. I wanted to share with the Mayor and Common Council that her last day with the city will be December 21st, and at your next meeting, we will have a resolution of appreciation thanking Darlene. Wanted to give you an update on the Bee City USA program, and Mr. Glass, feel free to also jump in. As you all likely recall, I wanted to check with Mr. Depot and Mr. Glass just to make sure that there were no undue consequences from an operational standpoint for their department. Both of them have completed their reviews and do support our participation in the program. Ms. Schlitzer in my office and our Assistant Street Superintendent, Zach Amos, had a Zoom meeting on last Monday, I believe it was, with the Carroll County Beekeepers Association to kind of talk about roles and responsibilities so that we could put together our application. That is close to being complete, and I will share that with you. Our next step is to draft the city resolution, and as required by the Bee City USA folks, we will submit the resolution that should come before you on December 14th. Their program does require us to submit that to them for their review initially. I wanted to share with you this evening that a couple weeks ago, you approved a contract with the National Research Center to do a community survey as part of our water reuse initiative. I have a call tomorrow with Capps and Associates and a representative from the National Research Center to hopefully get that survey design started. And then just wanted to mention that staff has advertised the public hearing regarding your ethics ordinance. That public hearing will be held on December 14th. And so I think that concludes my remarks. Mr. Glass, I'll go ahead and turn to you in case there's something that you wanted to add about the Bee City USA program as part of your report.
Nothing really to add about the Bee City stuff. I'm happy to see that it's underway, and I think it's going to be a neat project for everything that we do. I think that from what I understand so far, at least, much of what they're looking for is already in practice for us. So so that was good to hear as well. But as far as the departmental reports, just a few things. CJ Miller did start our annual paving project today. They're working at Key Street and North Street. and we'll be working at Tuck Avenue next week. That's in areas around the street department and the police department. Bids were open for a few projects: our ADA sidewalk project, our parking garage repair, and the Diffendall retaining wall as well. So they'll be ready for the next council meeting to hopefully award. We also had a pre-construction meeting with a company called Mr. Rehab. They're our contractor for storm drain lining work, and their schedule looks like they'll be starting in the first week of December. So that's all moving forward. That's all I have, unless there are questions.
Ms. Matthews, you're still.
Sorry about that. Ms. Colston?
Hi, good evening. In the finance department, we've been busy with, the day-to-day activities of dealing with the different finances of the departments in the city. We processed 2,100 receipts totaling $5,700,000 roughly, and processed and paid 592 invoices with 182 checks totaling about $2.4 million. I'm currently in the process of going through all of the processes and procedures that we have in the departments and with other departments to identify different areas that we can approve upon. Other than that, it's just business as usual. That's all I have if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Colston. Mr. Davidson.
I have no report tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Depot.
Good evening. So this upcoming month, December, there are no items for the Historic District Commission. The Board of Zoning Appeals will be hearing a variance for 68 South Ralph Street. This is for an addition that is going 6 feet into an 8-foot setback. It's just a continuation of the house that's existing there today. And then for Planning and Zoning Commission, tentatively, we have the Mission Barbecue signage package. They're proposing signage that exceeds what staff can approve, and therefore the Planning Commission must approve the size of these signs. I don't think there will be an issue with that. It's just process more than anything. And then also we did lose a vice chair for Planning Commission, and we will be having an election for a vice chair. So, and also reaching out to the mayor to possibly replace a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And just an update on Stonegate. I mentioned that we approved the increase for 8 more units. We promptly received the checks today and building permits for those 8 units. So we would think they'll be constructing those fairly soon. And that completes my report.
Ms. Gruber?
Nothing to report this evening. Thank you.
And Chief Ledwell.
Good evening again. So as Councilman Cavacci talked about earlier, and as I'd spoken on it prior meetings, we were participating as part of a countywide law enforcement leader work group to look at our use of force policies. Number one, to make sure that we're all in line with best practices or with the most up-to-date thinking on use of force, de-escalation, making sure that we're looking at it from a holistic approach. As a result of these work groups, we did draft a revision to our current policy. We're looking to go effective on that policy in about a week on December 1st. The other aspect of this policy group was to look at the potential as a county for all of us to get on the same page with our use of force policies. And in that same vein, to potentially work on some training curriculum as we move forward to train to best practices. Another component of that is that the state's attorney's office is going to be involved in the review of use of force reports as they occur. So wanted to make sure that we all had a similar process to make that as uniform as possible. So we did make revisions to our use of force policy. I will say that the existing policy, our current policy, did meet, checked most all the boxes for what's being discussed as best practice. I think what we were able to do is we were able to really emphasize key points to make sure that we ensure here at the Westminster Police Department and the other county agencies that those things such as duty to intervene and de-escalation are at the forefront of all of our staff's mind, especially the sworn staff, and that we promote a culture where it's practiced. And a lot of the incidents that have occurred and become nationally published and the source behind a lot of the reform movement with policing, you're usually involving more than one police officer on the scene of them. And so one of the components is to make sure that regardless of seniority or rank, that each individual police officer would have the courage to intervene should they believe another officer to be using excessive force or obviously doing something illegal. So we wanted to make sure that we emphasize that. There's also terminology related to de-escalation and types of training, types of way of interacting from a police to community standpoint that didn't exist years ago. Things such as trauma-informed policies that we now have information about. So we wanted to make sure that we included or involved that type of verbiage. And as we mentioned earlier, we were accepted into the ABLE program, which is a innovative policing program that's sponsored and coordinated through the Georgetown School of Law. So we were able to take kind of all of this information, make some, I think, decent revisions to our use of force policy. One of the things that I've done here with a lot of our policies are take the really long ones and make them more concise, succinct, straightforward, easier to follow. And with the use of force, what we did was we had conducted electoral weapon component of that, or the more common vendor name being taser. So separated that out and created a second separate policy for that. And then drafted a new policy just solely based on de-escalation. So those three things will go into effect on December 1st. There's potential state level legislation I know being proposed that might cause us to have to make some modifications, but my viewpoint is that, you know, it's better to get trained and roll out the what we feel are the best practices as soon as possible, because that leaves less of a window for something to happen between that time and when you're waiting for potential legislation. So I think we're going to be good when the state, or if the state does make mandates related to use of force policies for police departments or law enforcement agencies. But just in case, we wanted to be forward thinking. We touched on a number of other policies as a result of when I started looking into these three that are the primary ones, things that are related to use of force, such as our canine program policy, our criminal investigations policy, things like that. So we probably all in all updated maybe a couple dozen policies, touched on them. We currently use a document management software that we've had in place here for a few years that I know a number of the agencies around the area are now using, called Power DMS, which I think is a really good way to track our, not only our policies, but our standard operating procedures. And what that does is, instead of having to do like sign for sheets and make copies and send them out, make sure all of our staff signs for it, gets it back, keep a record of that. It does that through the software, and it keeps a footprint of who reviews the policy, We can create test questions for the policies to make sure that the officers aren't just glancing through them, that they have to know the content and answer the test questions related to the policy review. And it also allows us to not delay in making revisions when we need to, because it's much easier to do so. So, you know, if something gets brought to our attention, or we have discussions and we decide to make a revision or draft something new, it can be done very quickly, and it can be disseminated very quickly. And so it takes some of the bureaucracy out of the policy management. So one thing that we did effective today is that there's a state mandate that we have to have our police department policies available to the public on our website. So we've had that in place since the mandate. It's been a scrolling PDF, but Power DMS provides us with the function of having public-facing documents. So we were able, with the assistance of IT today, to go ahead and implement that. So if you now go on the city website and you click on our policies, you'll actually see our Power DMS folder structure on there directly. So as we make revisions or draft new policies or updates, I don't have to send a zip file to IT so they can put on a new PDF. It automatically updates it to the public-facing documents. So I think that's a really good feature. So that's one of the main things I wanted to talk about tonight. Some other things we have going on, we're also participating in this body-worn camera work group countywide, just in anticipation of potential future state mandates, and also to be forward-thinking throughout the county. I know there's a lot of logistics that go along should the city decide to implement a body-worn camera program. One of them being the staff required to review, redact, provide discovery. And I know the state's attorney's office has been involved in this work group and are looking at that also. So we're collectively looking as a county to try to be forward thinking with the body-worn cameras. And as part of that project, we are doing some training and evaluation of body-worn cameras. So we currently have 4 of our staff who are doing the training and evaluation piece. So I had to draft a policy in the interim for that training and evaluation. So that's been done. We also have our capital camera project, which is moving along. We had the bid process, the demonstrations. So we're pretty far along in that process. On December the 12th, we're going to be doing a modified version of our annual holiday season Shop with a Cop. This version is going to be pandemic friendly, in that we're not going to have any group activities. And just to refresh everybody's memory on the Shop with a Cop, there's money that's grant funded through Walmart that we partner with Walmart so that we can provide deserving families in the community who might not have the opportunity to get family gifts, to partner up with a police officer who goes shopping with the children in the family for their family gifts. And not only is it a good thing for the deserving families, but it also is a positive interaction between the community members and our police officers. And you know, from both sides, we get to know one another a little bit better on a personal basis. So we have that event scheduled for Saturday, December 12th at our local Walmart. Our custodian of 20 years, Miss Betty Ruby, is officially retiring at the end of this calendar year. She's actually out on leave now through the end of the year. So we have had discussions, and we've opted not to fill that position with a full-time staff member, but instead to look to contract cleaning services through a local cleaning company, as the remainder of the city offices do. So we're working on that process right now. We've also received notice from our property management specialist that she needs to resign to take care of some personal things. So we've put out a job announcement for a property management specialist position. So that job announcement position is currently still open. Let me see if I have anything else. I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Chief, thanks for all the forward-looking efforts on those things.
Thank you.
That concludes staff's report, President Pecoraro, unless there's any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Matthews. And that takes us to the final item on our agenda, which is citizen comments, which is when we invite the public to address the mayor and council on any issues that pertain to tonight's agenda or any other city issues. Since we can't allow live comments online during these meetings, and we're going to continue to host these virtual meetings until we can return to in-person meetings, we invite comments to be sent to our city clerk at comments@westgov.com. At this time in every meeting, I will read out all of the comments we have received. And the clerk advises me that we have received no comments since the last meeting. So that concludes our agenda and the meeting. I wish everyone a safe, healthy, and happy Thanksgiving. And our next regular meeting will be on December 14th. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.